Hello, my name is Matthew, and I read Notes from Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky, and I read the David Magershak translation from the Modern Library edition that I have. I found this, I thought I had lost it, and I'm preparing for um, reading Crime and Punishment in December, and I thought I've read Notes from Underground a few times, and it'd be a good introduction, lead into Crime and Punishment, and I'll read it again. It was longer than I remembered. I thought it was a short story. It's more of a novella length story, 180 pages, something like that, and it's barely a story at all. It's a character study of this unhappy, spiteful man, a man in his 40s. And uh, it's a story that has lost some of its charm for me. I remember thinking that this story was dangerous and daring and um, was so provocative and made you think, and it's pessimistic and cynical and um, it's full of anxiety and rage. As I was reading it and thinking, well, I'm 38, the narrator's 40, so not that we share any life experiences, but um, we're getting close to having the same amount of time of life experiences. And listen to this guy. And I still loved it. I thought it was great. Longer than I had remembered. Um, the beginning. I'm an angry man. I'm a sick man. I'm an unattractive man. There is something wrong with my liver, and I'm not quite sure what it is. And he's not going to go to the doctor. And he's writing um, these ravings. It's a nut, this crackpot that has all of these strange theories about life and death and what it means to be good or evil, and what is free will. Do we have free will, or is everything determined? And it's this philosophical tract um, coming through the mind of this completely self obsessed, egotistical, deeply unhappy person. Um, he gets on this riff about two and two makes four, and going, well, you're not going to believe this, and but believe me when I tell you this, and just ranting and raving. Um, and like I said, I've read this short story or novella um, a few times, and it does seem that um, the beginning third of the character study, I never quite remember as well. And each time, I suppose, or at least the most reading it today, um, it doesn't have the same punch as it had in the past, I suppose. But um, it does give you a sense of who you're dealing with. And um, the narrator is sort of talking to a reader, but is also acknowledging that um, these aren't letters, they're not journals, that there's no intended audience. And it does become kind of pitiful, pathetic. This is a person that is writing something down, but he's writing down just those unhappy shameful thoughts that I sort of relate with, like teenage angst of not believing in yourself and having superiority complexes and inferiority complexes, and um, feeling like the whole world doesn't appreciate who I am, and if they could just see past this exterior, uh, people would be admiring me, and things would be so much better. Um, and as the story goes along, I kind of come to the conclusion, well, there's no evidence um, that any of that would be true. This is an unhappy, um, bitter, spiteful, fairly average, unlikable 40-year-old man. Um, the fun parts for me, the memorable parts, are after a fairly long, ranting philosophical monologue, where we start getting um, plot points, beats that feel more recognizable as a narrative that you would see in a story. So this character, who at first is just, we imagine, locked in a cellar, um, scribbling angrily away on loose leaf pieces of paper. Now we have him out in the world, and so we get a sense of his strange philosophical ideas, um, unreliable. Uh, the beginning portion, he makes a point to say he may not believe anything that he's been saying. He might just be saying things that he doesn't believe are true. It could just be this emotional gush coming out of him. Um, there might not be anybody that will listen to him, and so he'll just say anything. But any event, we had this guy walking down the street, and he passes a bar at the moment that a man is thrown out of a window. And our main character is jealous. As if you might see a funeral procession go by and be envious of the man in the hearse. He decides that he wants to go into the bar and also defenestrate himself. He's in there looking to pick a fight, and we're inside of his head, and it is so solipsistic. He's just so wrapped into his own mind, and just imagining that everything around him is circulating around his presence. Every laugh, every look, every sneer, he's the focal point, which of course is relatable. That's how everybody lives, being the center of their own lives. But in the story, it's oppressive. And so he goes into this bar, looking to have one of these big throwdowns, a big angry fight at a pool table, and instead a man walks by, and our main character is in the way, and the man walking by picks him up by his shoulders and just moves him like a chess piece and carries on walking. And there's this utter humiliation that comes wiping down over our main character. To just be moved, as he describes it, as a piece of furniture, as an inanimate object, to be dismissed. He goes skulking out of the bar. No one knows that he's there, but he's utterly humiliated. He wanted to be thrown out of a window, and instead, he's just dismissed out of hand, as if he wasn't even there at all. And like George Costanza from the episode from the television show Seinfeld, a '90s television show where we have a wacky cast of characters: Jerry and his neighbor Kramer, his ex-girlfriend Elaine, his old high school friend George Costanza. And it's about their time in their mid-30s living in New York City and having 30-minute misunderstandings. And there's an episode where George, he's working for the Yankees, and he's in a boardroom meeting, and they have food served out. And during the meeting, they have shrimp cocktail. And George is this indiscriminate, ungraceful eater. He just shoulders over the plate and just shoves food into his mouth. And he's eating these shrimp with the cocktail sauce, and he has a big bib around his chest, and unceremoniously scarfing down these shrimp. And there's a man across the table that cracks a joke that lands, and the whole boardroom laughs at George. And the man says, "Hey George, the ocean called. They're running out of shrimp." George has a mouthful of food, can't respond, embarrassed, utterly humiliated, and on his way home, he's driving in his car, he has that moment of stairway wit. He gets the punchline, and he goes over to Jerry's house, apartment. Kramer arrives, Elaine arrives, he explains the situation and how he has the ultimate comeback, which is, oh yeah? Well, the jerk store called, and they're running out of you. And there's a really funny moment where they all kind of workshop his comeback, because they don't think it's all that funny, and they agree that the ocean calling and running out of shrimp is a pretty good line. Kramer offers, "Well, I slept with your wife." Well, just like that, our main character from Notes from Underground, days are going by. He becomes obsessed with this person. I should say it's not just like the Seinfeld episode, but starts following him, sees him on the street, follows him to his house, bribes a neighbor, figures out which unit he is in the apartment complex, decides he wants to recreate the situation in which they bump into each other. And that's the tie-in. So George Costanza wants to recreate the board meeting where he's going to purposefully shovel shrimp in his mouth, which is going to prompt the person to retell his line so he can have his great comeback, which is going to seem as if it was right off the top of his head. This perfect timed wit, which doesn't work out for George. But anyway. And he starts formulating this plot. There's a moment where they are walking down the street. They are going to bump into each other. And our main character loses his nerves and trips. And the man that at once picked him up and moved him as if he wasn't there just steps over him this time. He writes the guy a letter like 2 months after the fact. The guy has no earthly reason to remember who this person is at all. Our main character, throughout the whole story, almost every person that he meets fantasizes about um, murdering or attempting to murder. He like writes him a letter about how he wants to have a duel. He constantly wants to have duels with people. He's swelled up with pride. He's like a powder keg. Um, and he finally does bump into him. uh, the other really great moment in the short story is he visits some old school fellows, goes to someone's apartment, and finds out that there's someone that he really didn't like from his boyhood school days. This guy, Zerkov, and how they're going to have a dinner party for Zerkov, and they're deliberating. They're trying to figure out um, how they can treat him. So they're each going to put in 7 rubles or 8 rubles. Our main character is working for the civil service. He's poor. He's wearing ratty clothing. There's this great series of events of his coat that has a rat collar, and he wants to get a beaver collar. He has to borrow money. Ends up getting a low quality German beaver for a collar. But they're trying to pool money, and uh, he doesn't like any of these people. It's unclear why he's even in the room, but he's there, and they're all talking about this guy that he has had really bad dealings with in the past. This guy Zerkov, but they're going to pull the money together for a dinner party, and they're doing it in front of him, and they're acting as if he's not going to be included. And he goes, "Well, wait a minute, I can put in my money." And there's something genius about this storytelling aspects of this moment, because he's inviting himself. He was never invited to this dinner party, and he kind of like a carrot dangling the money that he can offer, and they don't want him there. They don't like him there. They know that he has a bad history with this guy, and but begrudgingly they consent. The dinner party is the next day at it's like the Paris Hotel or something. It's all set in Russia, but I think that's the name of the hotel. And it's a disaster. At that moment, it was a disaster. It was a disaster before anything happens, before it starts. He gets there 15 minutes early. Supposed to have dinner at 5. He shows up at 4:45. No one's there. No one shows up for over an hour. Turns out they all changed the date. They postponed it an hour. So they're all showing up at 6. He's infuriated, along with being mentally unhinged, emotionally unbalanced, bitter, angry, unattractive, unhealthy, all of those things. Finally sees this Zerkov character who, I mean, the main character is 40. We're talking about people that were old schoolboy friends, so potentially 20 years have gone by, and instead of having any modicum of decorum, any tact, our main character, who's already upset, he doesn't like any of the people that are there anyway, didn't really want to be a part of this, but convinced himself he wanted to be going there anyway. And then to have this social affront where they all agreed on a new time but didn't let the one person know. And so he's just irate about this. And potentially very drunk. He does get very drunk, or even more drunk. but he cannot contain himself. He's shooting out rude jabs and getting up and making speeches, and um, Zherkov and a lot of the people there do seem to be um, not only more likable, but decent people that are really kind of trying to handle or to just accept that there's this crackpot there and not let it get to him. Like, not all of them, but Zherkov certainly is um, being polite and graceful and does seem to not really be a very bad person. And there's a moment towards the end because it just becomes incredibly embarrassing. It's just utterly humiliating, like what happens during the course of this night. But um, our main character is talking about having duels, and they move over to a table, and he's not invited, and instead he's just pacing back and forth in the dining hall in front of them for 3 hours, drinking, drunken. And he goes over to Zherkov. They're about to leave, and he's like, I've offended you. And Zherkov goes, there's nothing you can say or do that would offend me. Just like being picked up by your shoulders and being manhandled and moved out of the way like a chess piece. Zherkov is kind of saying, you're so insignificant. There's nothing here, nothing about you, your presence, your life, our interactions that can mean anything to me. And they're going to go off to this other place. It's like a house. It's like a secret place that's only open at nights. And the story goes on. I don't know if I want to keep talking for 20 minutes. What happens next? He follows them again. And he has an encounter with Lisa. It's a woman of ill repute that works at this brothel. The third act, maybe I'll kind of end at this point, but we find out that this guy, who this whole time he's borrowing money, he has no money, he's wearing ratty clothes that are tattered and stained, he has a collar that has a rat fur on it, he has to get the cheap German substitute beaver collar, and well, anyway, has no money. Turns out he has a servant, which I found very surprising. But he has a servant. Of course, he hates the servant. The servant hates him. They're both tormenting each other. And he had this kind of horrendous, but at least memorable interaction with Lisa, this woman at the brothel, and he's thinking that maybe she's going to be coming to the house. He gave her her address. His opening line to her was about a coffin being brought out of a cellar, and he talks about how you're not always going to be this young, and you're not always going to be this pretty, and one day you're going to die. But I guess you can only go up from there, but he's expecting maybe she's going to be showing up to his apartment building. Days are going by. He's glad about it, then upset about it. He's having arguments with his servant in his apartment room. Practically, the two of them are at collars, screaming and yelling, when the girl finally walks in and finds him in this hovel. He's wearing his night dress. He has his hair pulled out. totally, utterly embarrassed over this. They end up in tears. They're just holding each other, sobbing. The servant has to go out and get tea. It's a mess. This guy's life is a mess. It's a strong recommend. Notes from Underground. And right after this, I'm going into Crime and Punishment. That's going to be my evening reading, and I'm looking forward to it. Um, those are some of my thoughts and other thoughts about Notes from Underground. Please leave a comment if you would like. Thank you for watching, and take care. Bye.